What's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Coco Vandeweghe here with us. World Team Tennis All-Star event coming up on Saturday. Coco, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little stir crazy, but getting some runs in, and the dog's more sick of me than anything.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a German Shepherd. She's chilling right next to me right now.
Love it. So you're not usually home, so I'm sure your German Shepherd is happy to have you home, but also probably a little annoyed because she's like, this is my territory.
Yeah, that, and she's like, I'm tired of going for all these runs. Like, enough is enough. There was a run yesterday where I was pulling her at the start to be like, come on, we got to go up this hill. She was not happy.
How long have your runs been typically?
3 miles or so. I mean, that's as much as I can actually tolerate before I'm like, all right, I'm bored. I get bored like everybody else on a run. I'm not one of those that like appreciates the nature of it all. I'm just like, no, I'm good.
Have you picked up a tennis racket at all? Try to do anything with it?
I have. I played a little bit on Monday. I'm going to play this afternoon a little bit, just at some private courts here and there, but just trying to keep my eye on the ball, basically. That's about all I can do.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's interesting timing because this World Team Tennis event was like one of the last things that was played before everything got shut down. So what was it like doing that event?
I love the event. I love World Team Tennis. Little did I know it would be one of the last live matches I would play for the year, or at least to this point in the year. And it's so much fun to play World Team Tennis with the atmosphere, the fans, and the music, and the different people you get to play against and play with. It's just so much fun.
And from what I heard, the San Diego crowd was pretty awesome for this event too.
Yeah, it was great. The San Diego tennis fans are amazing. I'm a little bit biased being a San Diegan myself, but we have a big tennis community out here, and for the poor weather that showed up in San Diego, which doesn't happen all the time, they came out in folds and all their warm parka gears, even though it was probably like 50 degrees. So they were dressed to the nines for it.
That's awesome. So for you, obviously coming from a big sports family, when did it feel like tennis was your thing? Like you started doing it as a young girl, but like when did you feel like this is going to be my thing going forward?
I started playing at 11, and I took tennis seriously by 13, 14. Started canceling out all the other sports that I played. I was one of those kids that played everything. I was told, if you're not outside playing a sport, you're inside doing homework, and homework didn't sound all that fun to me. So I just kept playing sport after sport, and I had an older brother who was close in age, so I just wanted to play every sport he was playing. And my grandfather sat me down and told me, you're going to have to start taking something serious, either basketball or tennis. And so I sat down and thought about it, and I decided I liked tennis better. I liked the individual aspect. I didn't have to depend on anyone. I only had to rely on myself, and whatever I did was kind of what I got out of the sport. And that was a lot of fun for me. On top of that, I had a bad basketball year. I had a group of girls that didn't really appreciate me missing basketball practices for tennis, and vice versa. I was missing tennis practices for basketball. So it was a combination of all those things that got me into tennis.
So how old were you when your grandpa sat you down for this conversation?
I was 13 or 14 years old.
And how was your basketball game? I mean, tennis has worked out pretty well, but how were you as a hooper?
It's poor right now. I went to shot baskets the other day, the first time in probably a year. And I was like, my gosh, I used to be good moving with the ball and stopping and shooting. And I was just goofing around and played a little horse. I still can, have some trick shots. Underhand free throw is nice. One of my specialties. I also nailed one from behind the basket over the top for the win. So horse, I'm still a danger player out there, but I'm not as good as I once was, that's for sure.
I like the fact that you played a bunch of different sports growing up. I think we see a lot of specialization these days. How do you think that impacted you in terms of your tennis career now?
I think that made me a better athlete. I think tennis gets specialized a lot, very young age. I started really late too, on top of that. But I find that takes away the athletic ability of a kid. I think you can learn so much about body positioning and balance and all sorts of different aspects of how to move from different sports. Because if you play one thing, you're going to be just putting yourself in a box, I think, as an athlete. And It's actually going to be interesting to see what the next generation of athlete looks like, because this generation of kids growing up is specializing really early in a lot of different sports. But I'm very thankful I played a lot of different sports, and it kept me interested in tennis, because tennis is a very difficult sport to play as a young kid. It's a lot of hours of repetition and drilling, which is kind of boring in general. I still find it boring now as an adult. I'd rather go play, games. It's way easier to play a pickup game of basketball than it is to play a pickup game of tennis. And so as much as coaches can find fun in tennis with games and that sort of atmosphere, and after school clinics was one of my specialties. I love that, just being in a team atmosphere. I think that's why I love World Team Tennis so much right now, is because it brings back that team atmosphere that I crave.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you get started a little bit later, and then the cool thing is, like, as a junior, you start having some pretty early success. So what were kind of a few of those moments early on where you're like, all right, I'm starting to do my thing. I'm really starting to create a path for myself?
It actually came a little out of nowhere. I made the finals of 18 nationals at 16. I was not a good junior before that. I was very much out of my element, hadn't had the reps that everyone else had had. I had a very different game than everyone else had. I like to move forward. The coach I had loved to have me serve volley, and so my baseline game was very lacking. And it showed definitely when I first started in the pros at 16. But when I won the Junior U.S. Open at 16, it was at that point I was like, I'm going to be pro. I mean, there's nothing else. I'm the best junior in the world at that point. That's what I thought. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to go pro and try my hand at pro. I don't want to go play college in tennis. It's not anything I want to do. So I turned pro and started playing professionally, and definitely got it handed to me a lot of times. I didn't start feeling comfortable as a professional until I was probably 20, 21. Because if you think of it, a 16-year-old playing against 20-something-year-olds is very much a big difference in development and just physically and mentally. And I was lacking on all fronts. I was very underdeveloped as a teenager. So I definitely had to take my lumps, and I think it made me a better player today.
Is there a match you look back on early on where it's like you just got smoked, but it was actually a good learning lesson for you?
I would definitely have to attest the first time I played U.S. Open, which was at 16. I played the number one player in the world, which opening night, Earth, Wind, and Fire opened up for the match, and I was absolutely scared beyond belief. I had never been on any sort of stage remotely close to this, and I don't think you can ever replicate that feeling. And I was playing the number one player in the world, who was Jelena Jankovic, who ended up making the finals that year, losing to Serena. And the score actually wasn't that bad. It just felt that. It was, I remember tossing up my first serve, the first point of the match, and I thought I was going to hit that thing into the stands. And it's not like those stands are very close. Those stands are good like 30 yards behind the baseline. And I actually hit an ace out wide when I was aiming tee the whole time. So as things work out, that's was one of the matches. I also made the finals of a tournament, my first WTA tournament in Stanford, and I lost to Serena in the finals. And that was also another one of like, okay, I thought I was doing good stuff, but there's still so much more to kind of gain and make myself better.
When you think about your career, I mean, you've had some good success in the slams. You've had a couple of semifinal appearances. What stands out the most to you about your success in those Grand Slams so far?
There's a lot of things that go into a Grand Slam. It's 2 weeks of tennis, and there's a lot of things that happen in between that you don't realize until you look back of like, wow, I actually achieved, so much. I think my first Grand Slam semifinal at the Australian Open was a huge success, and the way I was beating players and kind of the authority fashion that I was, I mean, I bageled Garbine Muguruza in the quarterfinals in the second set. So it was a lot of great matches, and that's in the U.S. Open, beating Aga Radwanska, who's now retired. She was definitely a very tough opponent for me day in and day out. Every match I ever played, I think I only had one victory against her in like 5-6 tries before that. And so I was going up against it, and it was such a tough match mentally and physically. And there's just so much that goes along with it afterwards of recovering and playing again, and the mental fortitude to get through that. And it just keeps continuing. And the Grand Slams are so emotionally draining that it took a lot out of me to get through those matches and to keep going.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, even thinking back to 2017, like you won that first set against Venus, right? And then it doesn't work out your way, but like just goes to show how difficult it is not only to package all those matches together, but like just to get through to that next match and try to win this whole thing, right?
Yes, I mean, you're in Australia in the summer heat, and it was funny. It was such a learning curve when I got the first set against Venus. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make a Grand Slam final. You know, I had already checked out as far as mentally, like, oh man, I got that set. You know, the second set is just gonna roll because that's what had been happening. And it was very much a check yourself kind of moment of like, okay, you thought ahead and it cost you a match. It cost you maybe a Grand Slam final, and who knows what happens from there. And it definitely brought me to adding a lot of things into what I wanted. It actually ended up happening at Wimbledon that year. I was in the quarters, and same thing happened all over again. I was playing a girl, and I knew who was in front of me, and I had beaten all of them handedly a couple times. And it was one of those things, again, thinking ahead, which caused me to bring in a mental coach. And I'd never done that. I was very against it. I thought it was all kind of BS. If you can't do it for yourself, like you need help, you know, kind of just a weakness sort of thing. And at that moment I was like, I never want to have this feeling again. And I had a great US Open summer, and going into the US Open on top of that.
How long have you worked with the mental coach?
Since 2017, Wimbledon. So
Nice.
still ongoing, on hold right now, because I'm like, what am I doing it for? Sure.
No, but I think it's really important to value the mental side of things. Even the way that we talk about mental health in this country has changed the last couple of years. And for you as an athlete, like it's an important thing to dwell on, and it's something that can help you out down the road.
Definitely. I think mental health is huge. I've learned it myself. I had to experience it to understand it. I was very much, like I explained, I was very much against the mental health of like helping yourself, or needing to ask for help, I should say. And I've always been a very much do-it-yourself kind of person. Figure it out. If you can't, then you're seen as weak. And that's kind of how sports has been expressed to a lot of kids. And asking for help is big, and it's definitely helped me. I can say I've never been more depressed in my life than 2017, when I was having the best year of my life, and on the court. And to come out of that 2018, I was really struggling mentally. It was unfortunate that I couldn't kick myself out of it, but once I did, I was so happy that I realized what was happening around me, and people were expressing to me how I was feeling, but I couldn't register it. And it was something that definitely needs to be talked about is mental health. It's very much an everyday sort of battle for everyone. Sports definitely magnifies it because everyone gets to watch you struggle through it.
Yeah, I give you a lot of credit for popping the trunk there, looking under the hood, because it's like you're going to be having all this professional success, and then personally, like things can be in a real big rut, and it takes talking about it, digesting and processing it, figure out what the heck's going on, and then figure out a way through it.
Yeah, and there's no time frame. I mean, it took me almost a full year to actually accept and to be able to grow and work through it, even though I'd been suffering for more than a year.
Yeah, no doubt. So you don't have the singles title yet, but you have one on the doubles side of things with Barty. So what was it like winning that Grand Slam?
That Grand Slam was so fun. I mean, in US Open, it's our home slam for the Americans, and I was able to come out of there. It was 2018, and I was struggling through injury. I had injured my ankle at Wimbledon that year, and after making finals of a WTA event a couple weeks earlier, and it was such a kind of blow just to go out there, and I was struggling singles-wise just because I couldn't compete at full strength. I was top 10 in the world in singles and couldn't compete as a top 10 player. And so I was going out there playing doubles with my good friend Ash, and going and struggling through these events, just trying to work my way back into tennis and fighting shape. And to hoist that trophy at the end. We were match points down, and it was so much fun, and have a whole bunch of friends and family there to see me do it, and to actually finally have that Grand Slam title is something special.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it should be pretty exciting to see what happens for you going forward. Also, like on the American side for women, like people that are your contemporaries like Sloane and Madison, I mean, down to Coco right now. How do you think the women have done such a great job at this? Like, what has been the key in building this whole thing out?
I can't speak for them, but I know for myself, it's definitely we definitely take accountability for what we do. I think the women on the U.S. side have been very fortunate in having to work for what we get, and it's a constant struggle, and we have to earn our stripes and still earn them. That's what I'm learning right now. Is I may have done so many different achievements that you've named, and sports is a lot of what have you done for me lately. So I'm having to re-earn everything again, which definitely was an ego kind of like knock, and I am actually kind of relishing having to re-earn everything instead of expecting things to come my way.
Right. You get to climb the mountain again, which is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it's a little fun. I never thought I would be in this position again, but I remember it was a lot of fun the first time I did it, and a lot of struggles and a lot of crummy Motel 6 of just being like, what am I doing here in a middle of nowhere town? And now to go back and to try and do it all over again is been really enjoyable.
Well, it seems like the motivation is there. So once we get going again with tennis, what are some big goals that you have for yourself the rest of the year and going forward?
Well, going forward, I would like to try to get back into the Grand Slam contention. I think that's always been a big goal of mine. I also love being an Olympian. I was an Olympian in Rio 2016, and I would love to try and do that again. It's a big goal of mine to always represent my country. I definitely always wanted to do that in whatever sport I played. I always wanted to be an Olympian. So those two things are still big goals of mine.
You and your mom have to be in a pretty small group of family members to be in separate sports as Olympians, right?
Yeah, she did it in two. She was a swimmer and volleyball player in the Olympics.
That's incredible.
So I'm slacking in just tennis.
Come on, Coco, pick up another sport already.
I got to pick up basketball again and see if I can actually contend.
So when people check out the All-Star event on Saturday, what are some big things you want them to be thinking about when they're watching it? Maybe they haven't watched World Team Tennis for the first time.
Well, shoot, it's the only live sporting event that's been taped in recent time that no one's actually seen. It's really fun to have men and women competing against each other. For my own perspective, I tried to tag Red Fu, the LMFAO singer, a few times. I didn't realize he was actually a tennis player, so he could kind of hold his own. But it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's actually interesting. Most sporting events have an all-star event. This is the first one for tennis, so you get to see the best of the best compete against each other.
That's awesome. Well, looking forward to watching you on Saturday. Thanks so much, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you.